Hello, kia ora, and welcome to the Creative Matters podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with artists from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm your host, Mandy Jakic. Tim Christie is a designer and artist currently based in Wellington. His innovative, fashion-forward artistic style has been described as a modern synthesis of op art, pop art, street art, and geometric expressionism. Over the last 2 years, he has extended his collection to include light boxes, large original acrylic paintings, and illuminated weavings, enjoying playing with the space or void between abstract and representational art. In this episode, Tim shares his inspirational story from graphic designer to successful artist and some of the stories in between. He talks about how he first came up with the idea for digital artworks while holidaying in Scotland, how he gained momentum early on with sell-out shows and a huge amount of interest from collectors, how he came to exhibit internationally, and how he now manages a very busy art practice and artistic business. Tim unpacks his varied digital and painting art practice, and he shares his fascinating creative process. He talks about another of his artistic ventures, this time with his wife Katie, and that is Yo Gallery, a hybrid world of art and yoga contained in a large light-filled space in central Wellington. Hello, Tim.
Hi, Mandy.
Nice to meet you.
You too.
And you're calling from, well, we're talking via Zoom, Auckland all the way down to Wellington. How is the weather? It's atrocious up here.
Well, it's meant to be terrible, but looking outside, it's actually kind of acceptable at the moment. Not raining, nice and calm. It's actually normally blowing a gale in Wellington most of the time, so it's actually quite pleasant and super. It's unseasonably warm for this time of the year.
Yeah, it is quite warm, isn't it? Yeah. So how are you?
I'm good. I'm busy as always. Got a busy program of stuff on, and I'm at home at the moment, about to head into the gallery this afternoon to do a talk to a bunch of art enthusiasts, and just juggling a number of different projects, which is always exciting. But,
and that doesn't surprise me at all. You do seem to have a lot of things going on, which is really exciting. So can't wait to hear all about it. And welcome to the Creative Matters podcast.
Great. Well, thanks for the opportunity. I'm very excited to share my story.
You're welcome. Okay, let's get into it. You were born and raised in Wellington?
Yes, that's correct. So, born and bred Wellingtonian. Grew up in a suburb called Karori, which is actually where I am right now, funny enough. So ended up living back where I grew up. But it's a pretty cool place. It's, I believe, New Zealand's largest suburb. So it's a massive sort of valley surrounded by hills and peaks. And all of these hills afford amazing views of the harbour or out to the Kaikoras in South Island or even out to Makara and Kapiti. Where I grew up was in a big house sort of on the edge of Karori with an amazing harbour view, and right beside a whole bunch of forest which fed into a big valley which is now actually Zealandia, but at the time was like a water catchment area. Very green place, lots of bird life, and an amazing playground. I think for me as a kid, me and my brother and my friends, and we grew up in the 80s, which typically for a lot of families, the parents were quite hands-off and kids disappeared for hours on end. And that's kind of what we did. That's one of the defining memories of my childhood, was just weekends exploring the bush, building tree forts, climbing trees, falling out of trees, and getting up to a lot of mischief, to be honest. When my kids ask me about childhood, I've got all these very naughty stories of doing naughty things with my friends, and so it's sort of hard to talk about childhood without at least referring to those. Like throwing stones on roofs and property hopping and breaking into the gun emplacements on Wrights Hill and rolling tires down steps, all those sorts of crazy things you do as kids. But somehow getting away with it most of the time. I mean, we got into trouble a couple of times, but it was a very free and slightly rebellious time. But in contrast to that, in terms of my upbringing, I actually had in some ways, quite a formal upbringing. Not in a religious sense, but my parents were both relatively traditional and sticklers for good manners and etiquette and things like that. We also my brother and I sang in the local church choir because it was an amazing choir. It was the last all-male parish choir in New Zealand, and I was a Boy Scout. So by all accounts, we were good, upstanding citizens, yet we would come home and throw stones at the Russian embassy after school because that was next door to our house, and sort of get up to all sorts of mischief, which maybe was a bit of a sort of a reaction to our childhood. And I don't want to paint my parents in a bad light. They were loving parents, but they just came from very traditional backgrounds,
which is pretty common for people our age. That's how most of us were raised, and you probably needed a little outlet to misbehave.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's perhaps what that was about. So yeah, that was sort of the early days. I went to Koori Normal School, and which is the local school, and I was quite a small kid, so I was small for my age. I had actually terrible eyesight. So I had glasses from a very young age, and I was a bit of an introvert. So team sport wasn't really something that I was massively drawn to. Although I'm quite naturally sporty and do a lot of sport now, but back then I wasn't pushed into it, so I didn't do it. So weekends were really this kind of free blank space to do stuff and be creative. And so one of my treasured memories of childhood was actually waking up on a Saturday morning, pulling the curtains back, seeing the glistening harbour, sun pouring in, and I had this pad of paper beside my bed and a big giant oversized clipboard and a pencil and rubber and ruler, and I'd just sit there and draw for sometimes hours on end. And it was sort of a time where there was, as a child, no responsibility. It was this almost open-ended time where I could just sit there and imagine and create, and I had a lot of fun doing that. I used to watch the Thunderbirds, that show, the Thunderbirds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I love that particular show. So I went through a phase of drawing all these crazy flying crafts and sea vessels, and with massive motors and things on the back, and that was sort of a whole phase. And then I remember my dad giving me this little book, which I think was called something like the Little Book of Drawing Houses, and it sort of detailed the concept behind perspective and vanishing points and horizon lines. And I just found it amazing that you could use maths and geometry to create these incredibly realistic three-dimensional houses. So that was sort of another massive phase, I think, that went on for years, where I just sit there and draw using my ruler and putting these vanishing points and horizon lines, these incredible realistic images of properties and things. Which, so I could have, it wasn't out of the question that I could have done architecture, actually. I used to do floor plans and all sorts of things like that. And interestingly, now my daughter does exactly the same thing. She's obsessed with drawing properties of, not pictures of properties, but of course, in this day and age, she's using software and technology to do that. Then Mum and Dad decided we should go to Scots College for a couple of years. So that was for intermediate, which was a private school on the other side of town. So we would catch a bus every morning to get to Scots, and I think it was a really good opportunity for me in the sense it got me just a bit more involved in other things, sort of extracurricular activities. And I can't remember too much about art at that stage, but I do just remember spending far too much time on my projects and making them look super nice from an aesthetic point of view. yeah, so that there's a couple of years there, and then on to Wellington College. Um, and so when I started Wellington College, I was kind of an all-rounder in a way. I mean, I loved art, and I was obviously really loving that at school. But I'd become a Wellington tennis rep somehow, miraculously, with very little training. I was a sort of cross-country runner and had won quite a few events in the previous years. So I represented Wellington College at running. I did the local musical again, got right into the choir as well. So Wellington, one of the reasons we went to Wellington College because it had an amazing music department and an incredible choir director, I guess, or music director. And then kind of what was interesting is that I was already quite small for my age, but I also was a very late developer, like chronically late bloomer. So I was still a boy soprano when I was 15, in my which was the fifth form, I guess. Year, what's that year? 11 now, is it?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was becoming a little bit mortifying for me, sort of singing solos with a high voice when all my friends started to, well, had just about everyone had been through adolescence by that stage.
Yeah,
Ended up becoming the shortest in my entire year because everyone else grew and I didn't.
really.
Uh, yeah, and then this sort of went on even the next year. I was like, surely something's going to happen now. And then in the sixth form, I was 16 and I was still a boy soprano, which was like bizarre. And
Unheard of.
was it? Yeah, it was really. And it wasn't actually that pleasant, to be honest, because I had to I just didn't believe I could sort of compete in any sporting context anymore. So I sort of pulled out of sport. I didn't actually enjoy singing anymore, but for obvious reasons. But one thing that did, was sort of completely unaffected by any of this was art, of course. And so I absolutely thrived in the art class and thoroughly enjoyed it, and generally seemed to pick up the top art prize. So it was a clear pathway for me, really.
Mm.
And
And that probably was like a happy place for you, sort of, when you were battling
yeah,
all the other teenage,
yeah, yeah,
difficulties.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. And I had a really good teacher, Tim Costello, and he was incredibly encouraging and passionate, and really supported me. And then I was also, of course, drawn to design. Uh, and as much as art, I sort of loved both, but also really did love design and kind of had an instinct for it. And so it was a sort of a no-brainer that I would go to design school in Wellington, which was kind of probably the place to go, I think, in New Zealand. It had a super good reputation.
Mm.
And had 4 years at design school, which was a really mostly really positive experience. I did quite a variety of subjects, but focused on graphic design, and also did a couple of advertising papers. But I did animation, typography, a little bit of one paper in web design, quite varied in a way. And but I knew by the end of design school that I definitely wanted to be a graphic designer. And I think it took definitely I needed the 4 years. It was partly a maturity thing, I think, for me, but it was in my fourth and final year that I really just started to get it, really. And I had a teacher who was particularly passionate. She was a young American woman, and she was just so enthusiastic and passionate about trying to convey her philosophies and ideas about what constitutes good design. And in particular, the idea of having a strong concept underpinning a piece of work and informing a piece of work. And I think through that, I just kind of finally understood, was certainly one way of doing great work. And so, yeah, graduated from design school with I guess, a degree in design and majoring in visual communications, and then looked to find some work. Essentially, that was the next step. But this was 1998, so there wasn't like an abundance of work around necessarily. So I didn't just sail straight into a job. I did a bit of freelance work through some I guess, contacts and friends and things. Got a bit of a contract with one small design firm, and but it was later in the next year, or the year after design school, that I really got my first proper full-time job, and that was in response to an advertisement in the paper. It was before the internet, probably, just about, in terms of job, in terms of Seek and job postings and things. So there was an ad in the paper, and it said, "We're looking for a junior Mac operator / designer, digital artist to support our creative team. We need bloody, bloody, blah. Put your case in writing." And so I thought, okay, I could send them my CV and a covering letter, or I could harness the power of an idea and send them something creative to not just explain why I'm a good candidate, but sort of demonstrate why I'd be good. So I had this idea of superimposing a suitcase out of some words, some text, to demonstrate my computer skills and photo retouching skills and digital artwork, but also demonstrate that I had the ability to think conceptually by doing something creative. So I wrote this kind of cringy paragraph as you would read it now, but sort of explaining why you could employ me for this, that, and the other reason. So it sort of started like I could tell you about my degree, I could tell you about my passion, I could tell you about this, that, and the other thing, or you could just look at the picture, 1,000 words in one image, and the suitcase was sort of coming out of the text, which is interestingly, and I just discovered this, funnily enough, in the basement only about a month ago, just lying there, a copy of this application. It's interestingly very close to what I do now in terms of my art practice, which is emerge images out of 3D images out of two-dimensional design. So it's quite spooky in a way. But anyway, I got that job, which was awesome, and started working in a small advertising agency in Wellington, and with some really cool creative people, and learnt a hell of a lot really quickly. And but one of the things that I experienced pretty quickly was how difficult it was to sort of work from 8:30 till 5:30, 6:30, 7:30, day after day after day in front of a computer, sort of the relentlessness of it, and stuck in a chair doing that sort of work. I hadn't actually fully appreciated that's what full-time work was. And I'm a naturally restless kind of person. And I just sort of thought, this is great from a career point of view, but actually I don't know if I can do this for my whole life. I just, I needed a bit more variety, and got very restless and a little bit anxious, if I'm completely honest. And so I sort of thought, I'm going to have a break at some point just to experience something different. And so after a year and a half, I actually left and went on a big trip overseas. Originally, I was going to go to Africa and do a whole trip through there because I'd saved pretty well. And then I met someone who was planning a trip to the Middle East and had booked a trip from Kathmandu to Cairo. And she tragically had actually just lost her partner. He was a Ironman and had slipped off his bike into an oncoming vehicle and died. And so she was sort of at a point in her life where she was looking for some kind of change. And we met each other and got on really well. And she convinced me to go on this trip. And so I thought, well, why not? I'm looking for something. So she flew to Kathmandu early, and I went, when I finished up, I went to Thailand and then joined her in Kathmandu, and then did this incredible adventure on the back of a truck with a bunch of other people right through the Middle East, which was extraordinary.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah, just an incredible experience on so many fronts, from diverse landscapes to cultural experiences, and visiting temples and mosques and ruins, and it was just sort of blew my mind, really.
And was that around 2001, did you say?
2000, actually, yeah.
2000, yeah. And that was something that you felt you needed to do to kind of get away from what you were doing, or did you feel like you just had to do that kind of adventure?
Well, I possibly harks back to my childhood. I was sort of mentioned that I was into exploring. Yeah, and also I just found sort of working in an office full time a little bit, yeah, surprisingly stifling. So it was a mostly really positive thing, but I just needed to, for whatever reason, I just felt I needed to get away.
Yeah, which
It
is
had an,
common,
and
common at that age.
Yeah, it is quite common. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an incredible year because that first bit was extraordinary in terms of the experiences that I had. And then even when that trip finished, I just wanted to do more. So I flew back to Turkey. And so the first thing I did, I guess, when I got home was, well, I lived with mum and dad for a little bit, and then I thought, well, I better find some work. So I did a few odd jobs. Got a reasonably good job with a small design firm. I was sort of the creative director for that, but I really didn't like the culture terribly much in the end. And so I reached out to uh, a guy called Rod Schofield, who had been the creative director of Red Rocks Advertising, the first place that I worked. And he was the creative director of Clemenger Design. So Clemenger BBDO, the agency, had decided to set up more of a dedicated design team or design business even. And so I reached out to Rod and said, I'm looking, have you got an opportunity for me at Clemenger? And he said, actually, I think we do. Let's meet up. And so I met him and the rest of the team, and then started. That was the beginning of 6 years at Clemenger BBDO, working as a designer. And I sort of thought this is a pretty amazing opportunity. I felt, and I sort of felt I'd probably be there for a reasonable stint. Yeah, I mean, Clemenger BBO was like a powerhouse of creativity. That Peter Biggs was running the whole agency, and he did an amazing job of basically just getting a huge number of high-profile clients on board, and it was booming. And there was almost a mission for Clemenger to take over the top spot from Saatchi & Saatchi, which had this incredible reputation in Wellington as like a globally significant agency.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. Clemenger BBO boomed, and so I was in this environment with some of New Zealand's best creative minds, and just getting some incredibly amazing creative opportunities. In particular, I just became more and more drawn to branding, taking a whole lot of complexity and dynamics and distilling that down into something simple, where you're really conveying the essence of a product or an organization. And so that was really incredibly rewarding for me, and I got to work on some cool things like, for example, the Inter-Islander ferry, sort of the brand for that, and the ship livery. And I did a lot of work for New Zealand Wine and did their sort of international wine brand. I had a part to play in the Radio New Zealand brand, and a whole bunch of other jobs that were just really satisfying. So I think I really thrived in that capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did 6 years at Clemenger, but then I again, like when I was at Red Rocks, I just found I just knew instinctively it wasn't sort of the healthiest thing for me. There was a lot of working late into the evenings, even weekends, and that's partly because I'm a perfectionist, and I just wanted to deliver quality work and get as much out of it as I could. And there was just always so much work. It was a big agency. You'd finish one job and you're straight onto the next. So it was relentless and at times exhausting, but amazing. But I just couldn't sustain. I just didn't want to sustain that for terribly long. But I just wanted other things. And then also I bought this house, and when I moved in, I kind of became, and this is another sort of tangent, but sort of obsessed with landscaping and design and gardening and renovations and everything. So that became a real focus for me in weekends, and even during summer in the evenings and things, I'd come home and just start doing stuff. But in terms of my design, I sort of started taking on quite a lot of freelance work while I was working at Clemenger, which I probably shouldn't have, but with a view in a way to transitioning away. I didn't want to do a cold stop. I wanted to build up a little client base, and then potentially transition away to a more independent freelancer lifestyle. And so I started doing that. I also then met Katie towards the end of my time at Clemenger, and that was an amazing time. And we actually got married the summer just after I left Clemenger, and so there was a whole new sort of chapter really for me in that sense. We were living together in my house, and I did have a brief stint at another agency, a much smaller agency, but he sort of headhunted me, and I thought, oh, well, let's try something that's a completely different culture and perhaps with a bit more lifestyle balance, which it was. But then the global financial crisis just hit big time, and unfortunately, he actually made me redundant, which I was delighted about. It sort of it was one of those bizarre things as he was telling me. I was, actually, this is great. This is just what I need. I need this kind of push.
Yeah. Good catalyst for you.
So when I left the Ramp, which was the job that I was doing directly after Clemenger, I was doing freelance work, and I was also working with Storby, which was an e-commerce business that I co-founded with some friends. And so I did that for a number of years, sort of juggling, doing a lot of sweat equity essentially in the software business because we weren't paying ourselves, and doing freelance on the side to basically fund our lifestyle. And by that stage, we'd also had kids. So we had a family, we had a dog, house. And so it was a pretty full-on time, I must say. And unfortunately, also around about that time, my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And she went through a 5-year decline, really. Or she had a bit of a remission and various treatments and things, but it's this thing called multiple myeloma, which is incurable, treatable but incurable. And that was a tragic day that she came around to our house and told us she had that, because I think that was just before we had kids. So so it was sort of a crazy time, that whole period. It was good in the sense that I had a degree of flexibility, but with a young family, mum's condition, working 2 or 3 days, sometimes a week on this software business, sometimes thinking, golly, do I really need this? But it was also quite fun and exciting at the same time. And then just picking out whatever design work I could do. Sometimes not always the most creatively invigorating, but sometimes was. So I was busy doing Storby. I was busy doing freelance design, and then we went on a trip to Scotland because my wife is Scottish and her family is based in St Andrews in Scotland. And so we've been there several times, and we went there for a Christmas. And it was the first time in quite a while, I think, that I'd had a decent chunk of time off. And there's actually a designer called Stephen Sagmeister, in the States who does a great TED talk on the power of time off and how it can completely unleash your creativity. Definitely worth listening to. And I think this is kind of, well, potentially what happened to me is we had 5 weeks off, and I remember the moment when I was lying in bed in my father and mother-in-law's house in St Andrews, I think probably in the middle of the night because I was completely jet lagged and all over the place. And I just suddenly realized, well, I've kind of got my mind back. I'm not thinking about other work-related things. And I just had this thought. And as a creative person, I have lots of thoughts and ideas all the time, but this one just seemed to really grab me. And it was just this thought of combining two-dimensional geometric design with 3D figurative forms. I just wondered, had it been done before? Could it be done? There was just something really interesting to me about the idea of a really sort of rigid graphic geometrical design that looked pretty much two-dimensional, but out of which imagery could emerge. And so when I got up the next morning, I just thought, I can't let this idea slip, which sometimes happens. I just need to explore it. And
I wonder where that idea came from.
I mean, it's probably, this is the thing, isn't it? Like having done so much so many different projects and so much design and things. It was uh, possibly also just traveling the way we did through Dubai Airport and seeing things you just don't know. But nevertheless, I jumped on my laptop and started trying to visualize this idea or express it in a digital way. And I actually have this distinct memory of feeling really guilty because I didn't put up the Christmas tree at all. I didn't help do any of that. And I said to my mother-in-law, I'll definitely help unpack the Christmas tree. And then I heard all these footsteps up and down the staircase as people were packing up the Christmas tree. And I was like, I'm just so into this moment of exploring this idea. I just can't go and do that. I've got to get this out. And so I spent 2 or 3 hours mocking up this image, which I decided to base on a polar bear for some reason. I think it's probably because it was freezing cold and we went far from the Arctic. So I did a polar bear image with this very diagonal geometric design, and I just looked at it and thought, well, there's something really interesting and cool about that.
And how did you mock that up at that point? What was that? What form did that take?
Oh, well, I was using Photoshop largely, yeah. So it was something that I could reproduce on my screen, and so I shared that with the family, and they're like, "Oh, wow, that's really interesting. That's really cool." And yeah, so I thought there's some value in this. There's something interesting about this idea. I've got to do something with it. But at that stage, of course, I wasn't even thinking art or some kind of pathway into fine art at all. I just thought I've just got to get it out there somehow. So we came back to New Zealand. Of course, I got swept up in with work again. But when I could find time, I started to create a bit of a collection based on this same idea. Different animal heads and some half animal, half human characters, which is called therianthropic designs. We've got animals with human characteristics and vice versa. And they just started to look, I started to create a really cool looking collection. And I thought, well, let's chuck these on some T-shirts and create a shop, which was easy enough for me to do because I was literally working in a e-commerce business. So I created a Strawberry shop and loaded up some T-shirts, and they were very popular, sold quite a few of those. And then I thought, there's got to be something more than just this. Perhaps these very design-orientated pieces of work would actually function as pieces of art that people might want to even collect and hang on their walls. So I found a fine art printer in Napier and sent them some super high-res files and chose the absolute largest possible size I could print and stretch. And about 2 weeks later, these big digital prints turned up at my house, and I unwrapped them and was kind of blown away in a way on a number of different levels. One thing, the printing was just so utterly precise because my work is incredibly detailed, and the line work ends up being less than a millimeter a lot of the time. So it just reproduced incredibly well, and these early works were black and white, and with large amounts of black ink, I was worried there would be banding or some kind of imprecise reproduction. Variation, yeah. But there was this beautiful pure black. It almost looked like just a rolled canvas with paint, just perfect seamless black canvas. And I was also worried about because the white details are so skinny in places that the black ink would fill in and degrade the actual imagery, but that didn't happen. It was just really cleanly reproduced. So that was exciting. And then also when I stood up close to these big canvases, I realized that you could get completely lost in the two-dimensional geometric design, that you wouldn't see the imagery at all. You just see it as a design. And then when you sort of step back, there's suddenly this void, this intermediary place where you start to see the imagery emerge, but the design is still kind of dominating. And then if you stand right back, suddenly it's as clear as day. You can see these images. And I hadn't experienced that to that extent doing the stuff I'd done on my screen or with T-shirts or anything. It just seemed really fascinating.
Yeah, and that's very much a big feature of your work today, isn't it? That sort of idea of when you're up close, it's one thing, and then something emerges as you move back.
Absolutely, yeah. And when I did, and speaking of that in particular, when I exhibited in Sydney a couple of years later, where I did some really big paintings. I'll talk about media and things later, but I intentionally did some massive paintings where I knew at this particular fair that people would walk past and just think, "Oh, that's kind of interesting," as a piece of abstract art, and that I would then be able to explain to them, well, actually, if you if you pull out your phone and look at it through the camera, or if you go stand back 10 meters, you'll see it in a completely different way. And I'll never forget this woman. She was looking at it through her phone and looking at me, and she said, "You're not an artist. You're a magician," which I thought quite funny, which
Yeah,
does kind of speak to the optical
yeah,
characteristics of my work, and people have subsequently described me as an op artist, or my work as op art. It's definitely a defining feature of it, although I didn't set out to become an op artist. In fact, I had very little understanding of what the op art movement was. I'd had some awareness of it, but that's effectively what I've kind of entered into, but with quite a different take on it, and that I'm actually revealing imagery and subject matter out of that optical experience.
yeah. And they are like sort of optical illusions almost, aren't they? Some of them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a big. I had a billboard up in Wellington for a while, and we actually put that up in the yoga studio. And it's a massive 6x3 black and white billboard, and most people walk in and have no idea that there's actually an image on it. So they just think it's some kind of abstract design. And then when you explain to them, just pull out your camera and have a look at it, there's this sort of revelation for them.
Yeah.
They sort of look at me and go, how are you doing that?
Yeah, and it is amazing how you've discovered that technique. And the thing I love about it too is that as someone who loves geometric abstract work, it's just such a fantastic image when you're close up. And then there's this other image to discover almost.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it works on two levels.
Yeah.
So you could just appreciate it for its geometric, abstract nature level, or both. Yeah, so it's this kind of an option there. Generally, I would say to people, if they're wanting to buy a piece of my art, that it's probably better if they've got a big room, or that they have at the end of a corridor, so that you can get to appreciate it in those different perceptive realms, rather than putting it in a tight hallway and never being able to really see it for what it is.
Yeah, you definitely need that, don't you? And were you thinking in those early days of your sort of art career, which was about 2017, wasn't it?
Yeah, so 2015-16 was when we were in Scotland, but it took me a whole year to kind of get organised and
work
actually.
It out.
Yeah, so 2017, was probably the first year I exhibited.
Did you actually have plans at that point to create something really unique? Was that something that interested you to find an art form that hadn't been done before?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think instinctively, probably yes. I think instinctively why I latched onto that idea as opposed to lots of other ideas I have is because, perhaps deep down I knew it was incredibly unique. I mean, I often just say to people, because just about everyone that looks at my art, when I'm in their presence, they turn to me and say, "Well, I've never seen anything like this before." I mean, there are artists overseas doing similar kinds of things, but I mean, certainly in New Zealand, most people say this is really trippy, or this is really cool, or this is really dope, depending on the generation. And then they say, and I've never seen anything like this before. So what I say to people, I guess, is it's very easy to do something different, to be unique. But you could just do some random thing, right? Just something really stupid and nonsensical, and it's different. And it's also, I wouldn't say easy, but there's a lot of traditional art out there as well. So it's easy to do a landscape and for that to find a market in a way. But I love landscapes, so I'm not discrediting that. But what I've fortunately tapped into is something that is quite unique but also very popular.
Yeah.
So not obscure and cryptic, and doesn't require a whole narrative to go with it to explain
Yeah.
it. There's sort of an immediacy and an intriguing.
Yeah, there really
uh,
is. And it feels like any age could connect and respond to what you're doing. And it's
yeah,
kind of it's
yeah,
very contemporary, but it's also accessible.
yeah, accessible. Yeah, which is a bit of a dirty word, but I that's the word I use sometimes to explain that. But it is in a way. It's become very. Yeah, I'm very lucky. It's become popular. So it's interesting in terms of your question. Was that intentional or not? Uh, Probably on some level, yes, but also it's kind of turned out that way. And
Mm,
I'm very lucky, because I think it's a rare space to be in where you've got those two dynamics working
yeah, it really is.
together.
And do you think that's the kind of that 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 art form, do you feel like can develop into other areas, or do you feel like that's the art form that you're just going to keep um, producing and keep sort of growing?
Well, I guess I'm just on a a bit of a journey at the moment, for want of a better word, where
Mm,
I'm just following my nose and instinctively iterating and exploring different mediums, and really teasing out this idea in a number of different ways, from even to immersive experiences, into digital contexts, as well as all the physical manifestations, including lightworks and paintings and things. So I'm enjoying that journey, really. But some people do say, "How do you keep doing this?" And sometimes I'm like, "My God, how am I doing this?" Depending exactly what I am working on. But
mm,
it's fascinating and interesting enough. And also, um, there's a massive market for it, and people are loving it. So that's obviously a driver as well.
yeah, that's huge, and it's such an international market, isn't it? Which isn't necessarily typical for New Zealand artists.
Yeah, well, I sort of worked out. Well, I realized pretty quickly that the subject matter wasn't. I mean, I do some New Zealand themed pieces, certainly. I've had a lot of success with the birds I've done, but I live beside Zealandia, so it's sort of a natural subject matter for me. But generally speaking, yeah, it's a very universal uh, type of art. And I sort of realized this pretty quickly. When I first exhibited so when I first produced these prints, I thought, how do I test this out? How do I even know that people want to buy this? And so the New Zealand Arts Show emerged as a great opportunity to expose the art to a massive number of people. They literally have thousands of people that, well, tens of thousands of people, I think, that come along to that event. And so I thought, well, what better opportunity? So uh, I was, yeah, to cut a long story short, I would have entered as a with my own wall, and been there and been there for the whole weekend, but I actually had a terrible eye injury, which is another whole story. So I was sort of a bit late to the piece, but I submitted some works, and they agreed to just exhibit them where they found space. And there was this big gala event which they have every at the opening of every event. And I started getting these messages. We didn't go to it. I started getting these messages from friends saying, "Your work's flying off the wall." And then my cousin, who was there, called me, and she was sort of shouting down the phone over the noise of this crazy gala evening where people are consuming vast amounts of alcohol and there's bands playing. And she said, "Tim, people are fighting over your artwork," which I thought was probably a bit of an exaggeration. But we went there the next day as a family. I wanted to show the kids, uh, and I wandered around, and there was nothing there. And I talked to the artist liaison woman, and she said, "It's all gone. Have you got any more?"
Really?
So that was my sort of first experience ever of exposing that art to a
Mm.
buyer base, I guess.
And how amazing to for you to believe in it and love it, and then to see that sort of reaction.
Absolute win-win. Yeah, it was incredible. And so she said, "Have you got any more?" And we were en route to the Wairarapa with the car loaded. And Katie jumped and said, "Yep, no problem. because we had some stuff on the walls at home. So we drove home, and I remember being squashed into the front seat with my face pressed up against these pieces of art, and we took those in, and then they all sold. So that was my first experience. And so then I thought, well, this is done really well as an initial test, and the subject matter, getting back to your question, is quite. There's no reason why that couldn't do well overseas potentially. I mean, I had no idea. And so I sort of thought, well, I'll just reach out to my father-in-law again, and back in Scotland, because he's quite an avid art collector and has purchased from a number of galleries in Edinburgh. So I thought, well, there's just nothing to be lost at all by asking him, would you mind just sharing my work with one or two galleries when you're next in Edinburgh? And he said, yep, no worries. I'll just send me a digital file and I'll have a chat next time I'm in town. So he wandered into a few galleries, and one called Castle Fine Art, and he reported back saying that they thought it was really interesting and could you send some large prints over there, which is no problem at all. So I got some new black and white prints made and sent them all the way to Edinburgh. And then there was some conversations around, oh, well, we're part of a big gallery group, but we could potentially, from time to time, we can exhibit individual artists, so we could potentially do something like that. And then I heard, a few weeks later, I heard that back from the gallery, that the owners of this gallery group had been visiting Edinburgh and had seen my work sitting there against a wall or something, and said, oh, wow, what's this? This is really interesting. And she explained, oh, it's this New Zealand artist, and they said, oh, well, Tim can be a finalist in our competition, which is an annual competition this gallery group does every year. They push it out globally, really, so they get artists from all over the world. And I just somehow slided straight into the as a finalist, which was just crazy, because I wasn't even. This was just starting,
That's so exciting, isn't it? That just must have been such a buzz.
Yeah, massive buzz, and quite a. In terms of the gallery, it's quite a. It's actually one of the biggest gallery groups, if not the biggest, in the UK. So they've got about 50 galleries, but it is a very, more of a retail, commercial orientated type of gallery, quite different from a dealer gallery in New Zealand. And they tend to represent quite a lot of celebrities in a way that have delved into the world of art. Like, for example, Johnny Depp is now painting pictures.
Really? Really?
And they represent him, and they've represented Bob Dylan for a number of years. He does these iconic train track paintings. Billy Connolly, it's bizarre. But that's sort of their position, and as well as a bunch of other full-time artists. That was awesome. I was like, yeah, I'm totally happy to do that. So we ended up, all of us, flying all the way to Manchester, because that's where the exhibition was. I just figured my in-laws would rather spend time with the grandkids than with just me. So we coughed up the money and did that trip. And it was just such a kind of unique experience. Like, yeah, I can't really just miss out on this. So, but yeah, one of the things that they asked for when I became a finalist, they said, okay, here are some details about the event, and can you give us some information, including your Instagram feed, Instagram handle, I think they call it. And I didn't even have Instagram. I wasn't on Instagram, and I was barely on Facebook, not really into social media much at all. And then I looked at some of the other artists that were in this competition, and some of them had like 20, 30,000 followers and things. And some of them were full-time professional artists. And I was thinking, I'm just way out of my league here. And there's no way in hell I'm going to be able to win that, because there were three categories. There was a People's Choice Award, a Innovation Award, and then sort of an overall winner, I guess. And I thought, well, there's no way I'm ever going to win the People's Choice Award, because all one of these other artists needs to do is just tell their fan base that they're in this competition. Suddenly they'll be inundated with votes.
Yeah.
But I felt I kind of had to do something just so I didn't look like a complete numpty. And so created an Instagram account and invited my Facebook friends onto that. And then I did something with a local newspaper in New Zealand, and that was about it, really. And then flew over to Manchester. And there was also voting in the gallery, so people could look at the art and submit who they thought was their preference. And then halfway through the evening, there was this big sort of event. They announced the awards, and they started with the People's Choice Award, and they said, and the winner is Tim Christie. And I was just like completely dumbfounded. How on earth could that possibly happen?
So good.
And I'm still unsure. But uh, I think it's perhaps probably there was more of a waiting for the people voting within the gallery. I think also it made me realize perhaps sometimes people with massive Instagram followers don't necessarily have like really dedicated, loyal followers.
Yeah, totally.
There's a little bit of nonsense there, perhaps. But anyway, that was sort of my first ever kind of group exhibition with a gallery, and I won that award. And
that's an incredibly successful start to your art career.
Yeah. I mean, insane, really. It filled me with a lot of confidence. And then I talked to the owner, so one of the owners of this big gallery group is actually called Washington Green, is the sort of the group that runs this whole operation. So I talked to him, and he said, yeah, really love your work. What would be great is if you could do one-offs. Have you considered painting these digital pieces so we can, you can do one-off original pieces of art, because they would be a more high value price point, I guess, and a more high value piece of art, really.
And with the prints that you were doing before, they were a limited edition, I presume?
Yes, all limited editions. Yeah.
Of how many?
Well, I started off doing only just 10. Very small, but it's digital art, so it's slightly different from, say, doing a massive painting and then wanting to leverage that. So I thought I'll do limited editions of 10, and that sort of worked well for a while. And then I started selling out of the 10s, and so generally now I do around about 50. Yeah. But this guy anyway sort of said, well, if you can turn these into paintings, that would be quite interesting. And I had actually played around with that a little bit, but not entirely successfully. I literally tried to paint some of these skinny, perfectly straight lines with a brush, and it's completely and utterly impossible. Just the slightest movement and it's all over.
Yeah, you'd lose the effect, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and let alone the patience that would go with that. So
and were you masking at that with those?
No. No. That's at that stage when I was talking to the owner. No, but I said to him, "Look, yeah, I'll work it out. I'll come up with some solution. I think I can do that because I've explored it and I want to do it. So I think I can do it." So I came back to New Zealand, and then I went to my fabricators who had produced my light works for me, and I sort of talked through what I was trying to achieve, and they said, well, maybe we could do this with masking, with using what's called a contour cutter on adhesive vinyl, and so that's what I tried. And there was quite a process of trial and error. Initially, I would prime the canvases, and then as soon as it dried, I would stick the vinyl on and then paint. And then two problems with that. When I ripped off the vinyl, the paint, the base layer hadn't cured. So I didn't even really understand this principle of paint needing like 2 or 3 days to cure and actually harden. Whereas, so that was a bit of a learning curve there. Plus also the paint, when I just used standard acrylic paint, it had this tendency to run under the lines a little bit because I wasn't spraying. I mean, I could have sprayed, but I really wanted to actually use paint.
And was that on canvas at that time, or what?
Yeah, on canvas.
Yeah, sometimes with canvas, it's got that texture sort of allows little bits of leakage, doesn't it?
True. Yeah, that's. I mean, that's a good point. I hadn't actually considered that necessarily. Although the canvas I was using was quite tight. Well, it wasn't particularly textured, so I didn't. But anyway, I figured out that what I needed to do was thicken the paint, and so I talked to an art shop, and one of them suggested chalk, which is sodium carbonate or something like that. Chalk dust. So I started mixing in chalk dust into the acrylic, and that worked beautifully.
Really?
Really thickened up the paint. There was no running.
Wow.
The viscosity was right, and
well, that's interesting. I've never heard of that. It's amazing.
Well, I don't think many people generally paint onto a stencil, if you like. Most people will spray paint, so they
Mm.
sort of encounter that challenge. But the cool thing with painting, of course, is and this is what I started to do. I do one layer, but then I would start sort of throwing paint and splattering paint and adding all sorts of painterly qualities to the paint, so that you get this really interesting, I guess, effect of what feels like a very precise digital design, but upon closer inspection is beautifully textured and has these painterly qualities,
Yeah.
which I thought was kind of interesting. So yeah, I did a whole bunch of those and sent those over to the UK, and they did a couple of solo shows with me. This was sort of not long before COVID, but it also, to be honest, aside from that, it just opened up another whole realm for me in terms of just painting generally.
Yeah.
This approach,
Yeah. And
I
with
did.
the when you were putting the paint over the stenciled stickers, could you just kind of treat it like a whole canvas and just work your magic with the paint and then purely pull off the sticker to
Yeah,
show what was underneath?
yeah, I mean, what I tend to do is paint along the lines,
Okay.
follow the lines. So when you pull it off, it almost looks like you've painted on the line, painted
Right.
in the direction that the lines are going. It's certainly for
Yeah.
the line works. I've done some other sort of dot paintings and various other things, but for those pieces, yeah, I wanted the paint to kind of have the direction of the paint to have some connection to
Yeah.
the
I
spirit
know
of
what
the
you mean.
design.
Yeah.
Um, and that sort of worked. But I mean, I could have potentially got a roller and just rolled it on, but then maybe the viscosity wouldn't be right with a thickened paint.
Mm. Mm.
And sometimes I didn't get the quantities quite right and ended up being really thick and turned into this sort of encrusted mess. But that's still better than the paint bleeding, which kind of wrecked the whole thing. So
Yeah. Wow, it just feels like you've got this concept, this highly original, very popular concept for art. And then you've got all these sort of subcategories that you can take it. I mean, it's like you've got that idea which you're presenting in different ways through lightworks or through paintings or through digital prints. And to me, it just feels like you've got the, you know, the whole world of ideas and potential and
yeah.
work to sustain you for the rest of your life.
Oh,
There's so
it's
much potential.
no, you're absolutely right. It's almost completely unlimited, and kind of that's one of my challenges. Is what do I where do I go next? What do I do next? And I guess an example of that was now coming back to New Zealand, and I kind of diving into my success here. So I had some success overseas, and then just before COVID, I got a random email from a gallery in Queenstown called Art Bay, and from a woman called Pauline Bianchi, and she had or discovered my work through another artist or one of the artists that they represent, and she wrote me this email saying, "We've seen your work and we love it and we want to represent you," which was just amazing. I was like, "Wow, okay, this is yeah," because I had a proper look at the gallery, although I was following them, but I had a deeper dive and realized they represent some pretty amazing artists and command some pretty good prices and have some very central locations in Queenstown where they attract some very affluent buyers, which all stacks up well for potentially transitioning to a full-time artist,
Mm.
in terms of making my whole practice viable and stuff. But also just the sheer opportunity to exhibit with this gallery was awesome. But she said, look, I'll come and visit you in Wellington, and we'll have a chat about what we can do. And by that stage, I had didn't have a gallery or anything, so I was pretty much based at home, and I had quite a range of pieces from pure digital art to these large paintings to a couple of light works and also weavings, another thing that I got into.
Mm.
And so I had all these things. It was almost the perfect timing because I was really exploding the potential of what I was doing and exploring all these different ways of presenting this concept. And so Pauline came up and visited, and she was incredibly positive, and she was particularly drawn to the light works, and she said, "Oh, these are fantastic. I definitely think we can do something with these." And she looked at the weavings and said, "Oh, these are pretty amazing too. Have you considered combining the weaving and the light art?" Which I had. But like we were saying before, I was almost paralyzed by which direction there were so many different ways I could go. I just hadn't done that particular thing. But she said, look, I think if you do that, then that's quite an extraordinary piece of art, because there'll be no one in the world that's ever done anything like that. And so it's going to be quite, and also just the way in which you can block out the light with a weaving is kind of cool, as well as presenting an image through that abstract design. So that gave me a little bit of focus to explore that. So I started creating, well, I'd created an initial light work, which was an acrylic box essentially with a LED system, and behind that was fully wrapped essentially with a hand-woven piece of art. And
underneath the acrylic?
No, over the top of the acrylic.
Over the top.
Whole weaving. So basically you build this acrylic light box, and then I get so the weavings are where I'm actually it's more sort of vertical horizontal art, where I'm actually taking an image and then turning that into a vector file format, which can then be cut by a computer-driven cutting machine. Quite incredible technology, actually. Initially I was laser cutting it, but now there's another machine that I use, and that cuts a material into a whole lot of different strips, which you then basically hand weave together and wrap around the whole box. And for the initial ones I was doing, I was using a more like a blackout canvas material, so that anything black is recedes, and then all the gaps basically allow the light to come through, which then starts to delineate the image. As well as, of course, like my other works, from close up feeling like just an abstract piece of design. So,
and that had that same element of moving back and forms becoming more obvious. Yeah. So is that the weaving? Did you leave the material on it, and that's part of it, just like taking around the light box, and then are you actually going up and down or under over type weaving, or just crisscross?
No, absolutely weaving. Yeah. So I don't know what the actual word for that is, but yeah. So you sort of lay down the vertical strips first, for example, as sort of individual strips, and then you take the horizontals and you're literally weaving in and out, in and out. And it takes a very long time.
It would do. And I've been dying to know, like, I guess you don't really want to divulge all your secrets in your process, but how do you work out what size the spaces need to be to create this image that appears?
Just it's all digital, really, to be honest.
And then how do you transfer that to the light box and get that right with your weaving?
You just work it all out on the computer. I mean, it's just taking and scaling if need be to get it to fit, but it's taking, I mean, I know what the light box, I've decided on some set sizes for my light boxes generally, so there's a degree of standardization, so that I'm not doing the whole, working out a whole new formula for each piece. And then it's just using those measurements and adjusting the artwork accordingly, getting the right resolution in a way, because if there's too few strips, if it's too much of a broad pattern, then really the image is just going to become too obscure. So you sort of need a critical number of strips to actually be able to see something out of it. So there's, I guess, a sweet spot for that. And if they get if you have too many strips, then the skinny sections can literally break, it just becomes impractical. So there's a sweet spot. You've got enough strands that are going to hold together when tensioned and depict the image.
Amazing. And then do you have to actually measure exactly where that strip is going, or is that sort of done as one piece?
Well, it is kind of done as one piece, but in terms of attaching it to the light box, you have to put in some reasonably precise measurements so that everything sort of matches up. So it's quite technical. It's quite laborious, a lot of that. There are, when I was doing, I haven't done so many weavings of late, but when I was doing those en masse, I sent quite a few to the gallery initially in Queenstown. There were times where I was going, oh my gosh, I could actually just do with an apprentice for this. This is, it's, you kind of go into a different zone and put on some music or listen to a podcast, but it becomes more of a technical process rather than a creative process by that stage.
Quite mathematical, isn't it?
Yeah. And sometimes I'm going, how on earth did I find myself doing this? What am I doing this for?
Mm.
But it's just so satisfying when it actually comes together
Mm.
and you see what the result is.
Yeah. Have you done any of those weavings with paint on canvas?
Funnily enough, I've done one, which was the very first weaving I did, which was an image of my son, Jasper. Yeah, I sort of went all out. I thought, well, I'm going to just throw everything at this. So I've got some recycled billboard canvases, and I sprayed or painted fluorescent paint all over it. Then I started throwing, splattering paint, and then I took it to a laser cutter because I was just curious to see whether the laser cutter could cut through all of those layers, which they were able to kind of.
Mm.
Um, and created, that was sort of a painted weaving piece.
Wow.
I've done a little bit of that, and I've done some weavings where I've painted the back, added some textural qualities to the backing board behind. And even I've done some where for one of the directions, I gave it a slight metallic effect, so it created more of a checkerboard effect when woven together. Uh,
Beautiful. So once
so
again, you've got the idea, even just within that subcategory of weaving, but then you've got texture to explore and color and
mm,
effects of like the shine or metallic or gloss or matte or monochromatic or multicolored. I mean, it just feels like once again that you've just got so much potential, which is probably all buzzing around in your head.
yeah, and then that's not even talking about the immersive stuff I've done, the large scale stuff. It's not talking about the digital
Mm,
potential of what I'm doing, and then I'm not even talking about the product and merchandising stuff, which I haven't really properly tapped into, but I could if I wanted to.
yeah, it's all there, isn't it? And
Yeah.
can we talk a little bit about the dot paintings?
So last year, in addition to everything else I was doing, I decided to create move away a little bit from the line work and see if I could do some cool stuff with dots. And this was partly because the Poeta Room, who I exhibit with and sell a lot of my prints and things, were wanting to do a solo show. And I thought, well, let's just do something a little bit different, try something different. So I started developing these compositions digitally, as I do with all my work, starting with a digital design based on the Fibonacci spiral, which is a numerical sequence which, interestingly, actually replicates growth structures in life and things like that. So it's an inherently very beautiful configuration. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to emerge imagery out of that sequence with dots,
Mm.
which I managed to do. So I did a range of designs, mainly focusing on bird life, actually. And because, as I may have mentioned, I live literally right on the doorstep of Zealandia, and we have prolific bird life every day in our garden. So I'm sort of familiar with the subject matter. And as a keen gardener, I'm often outside and enjoying the birds. So I thought, well, let's do something that's sort of true to me and true to my art form, but in a slightly different way. So I did these designs, and I thought it'd be really cool to do some originals as well. So some paintings of these designs. So I created effectively some templates over which I could apply blobs of paint to create some really interesting painted pieces depicting these compositions, which turned into quite a massive exercise. When I first started, because each of these dots is a different diameter, and each dot has to be very carefully plonked on the canvas with a brush, so it has a sort of a nice solid three-dimensional aspect to it as well. That's what I wanted to do, rather than just a template and spray painting or something like that. I thought it'd be really cool to actually individually apply each individual dot, which is a really cool idea. And then when I started doing it, I was thinking, actually, is this a really cool idea, or am I just giving myself a whole load of punishment? Because
Yeah, big headache.
a big headache, because I'm a naturally restless person, and I thought, golly, how am I? And then I counted them. I thought, actually, how many dots do I actually have to do for these pieces? And it was like 2,500 dots. And I'm thinking,
Really?
this is going to take, each one is going to take like days, or at least over a period of, a number of different sessions. And so it almost actually became a meditation because I had to slow myself down. There's no way you can do this quickly, and sort of load up the paintbrush and then sort of release it onto the canvas
Mm.
time again. So I listen to a lot of podcasts and sometimes music just to get myself in the moment, and actually curiously started to really enjoy it.
Yeah, I can imagine it would have been very therapeutic.
Yeah, I sort of almost even more than any of the other art that I've been doing, I suddenly realized, well, I can fully understand the pure joy of craft, of just literally working with the material and and it was actually, to be honest, almost like a return to childhood. I definitely experienced that. It's like, wow, I'm kind of doing what I did as a kid. And I just didn't think about the time ahead of me or worried about the other things I should be doing. I was just like, right, no, I've got 4 or 5 hours. I'm just going to block that out, turn off my phone, and I'm just going to enjoy doing this repetitive process. And I kind of did. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was uh,
that would have been amazing. And you can really lose yourself when you're in that kind of, meditative technique that you
yeah.
just, I actually spoke to Sarah Usendorp. She's done, in
Mm.
one of the podcast episodes, she's done lots of tiny, tiny circles that sort of then an image comes out of that as well, but in a different way.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
the therapeutic qualities of, I don't know if it's the circle or if it's just that repeated process is quite powerful, isn't it?
I think it's the craft of well, just it's the physical process of doing something where it requires a lot of detail, maybe.
What's your technique for getting that perfect for you?
The right brush. And using different brush heads for the different types of dots, and sort of loading up, kind of blobbing the paintbrush vertically into the tin or whatever it is. So it's sort of this big blob, and then not dropping the paint where it's not meant to go, because I did that a couple of times in complete nightmare. Delicately hovering it over the spot where I need to drop it, and then just pushing the paintbrush down, and then you kind of keep pushing and expand the circle until it gets to the right diameter, and then release
Mm,
it.
that's really
And I did
beautiful.
these, yeah, I mean, we haven't really talked about social media much, but I sort of tend to do a lot more on that now. And I did these videos of, it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors, but I sort of videoed applying the last dot close up. So you're just seeing this dot carefully applied onto the canvas. And then I got Katie to zoom out. And like with all my pieces, it feels like a complete abstract thing. And then suddenly this image kind of emerges on a canvas.
Yeah, which is so effective. And
Yeah.
that I love the sort of, it's like a positive and negative space kind of working against each other almost. And your works seem to use positive and negative space in different ways in some ways. But I guess that's a big part of your practice.
Yeah. I mean, it's just harking back to the graphic nature of it. It's very connected to graphic design,
Mm,
very design orientated. It's very black and white. But I describe it as black and white, black and bright, black and light for a lot
yeah.
of my work. That high contrast dynamic effects with the lines, it becomes almost quite a vibrational, quite sort of almost a retinal experience. But yeah, very, very design orientated. And interestingly, with the big immersive exhibition I did last year in Wanaka, a massive immersive installation in Puzzling World, which is all about uh, immersive optical experiences and illusion rooms and things like that. I was sort of considering the black and white nature of my art and how that could feed into a concept. And then I thought, what about opposites? Because that's in a way what my work is, sort of that high contrast opposite effect.
Mm,
Can I do something for one of these spaces to do with opposites? And then I thought, what about oxymorons, which is where you have opposite ideas creating a singular sentiment, which are really interesting things.
mm,
Like deafening silence or something like that. We've got completely contrasting ideas coming together. And I thought that's an interesting sort of parallel to my work in a more conceptual way. And so in Puzzling World, I had two spaces to work with, two massive long hallways. So one of the rooms was all about animals. It was called the Glow Safari, and that was all with dots. But with the other room, I wanted it to be all about people and emotions, and using oxymorons to sort of explain all the different ways that people can feel and behave. Again, revealing those faces and those expressions and those emotions through this binary style of art. That up close is completely confusing. And so we actually encourage people with prompts to pull out their phones and experience the art by looking through the camera. But yeah, so that was an interesting extension of an inherent aspect of my work.
And it looked so amazing. It looked like such an incredible experience. And it's such a fantastic thing for you to be doing for the public who might not normally engage in art, and that's that accessible word again, but it does feel like something that can really bring people in, an art form that can bring people in, including kids, which is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. A completely different audience from a typical sort of a high-end collector or something. Although you might get one or two of those wandering through. Wanaka's become a pretty affluent, incredibly affluent place. It's quite frightening, actually. But there's billionaires building bunkers in Wanaka now.
Really?
But there are, it's become globally sought after. But generally it's got a very sort of family-orientated audience. You're getting people and kids experiencing something that's that they wouldn't normally see.
Which is fantastic. You're doing a great thing for society. The NFT side of your art practice, and I know that's just, you've kind of just dipped your toe into that. But, that is a really interesting topic for lots of people and lots of artists. How do you approach that?
Well, the way that started for me, actually, funnily enough, was through my light art. So, in terms of the initial impetus, so someone contacted me out of the blue. They said, "Oh, I've seen one of your light works. Absolutely love it, but it's just completely out of my price range. Would you consider selling me a digital file instead?" I thought, wow, we really are in modern times that we're having that kind of conversation about art. Was kind of extraordinary. And I said, "Oh, well, yeah, that's fine, of course. We'll do it as an NFT." And I was aware of what was happening in the NFT space, particularly was it the year before last where it sort of exploded, and there was all sorts of things happening. And as a digital artist, naturally, I was drawn to the space and thought I should probably do something here.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I created a small series, actually, one of which was the particular piece this guy wanted, and minted those. And I'm not going to get into all the technical complexities of that, but it's not terribly difficult when you're on a platform. But you basically buy some cryptocurrency and use that to mint a piece of art, which becomes a completely unique file, if you like. That's the magic of NFT. There's no way anyone can sort of steal that or rip it off. I mean, they could technically, but there's a unique chain that connects that piece of art to the blockchain forevermore, and that even includes on selling. So if someone sells that, then you can get a royalty because you, as the artist, are forever connected digitally to that piece of art. I did a little bit of that. Then I did another NFT collection for Saatchi Art. They did a big sort of global project, and I thought I'd try that, and they all sold pretty well, which is cool. Vincent van Gogh, they decided to base a whole exhibition on that and doing modern interpretations of Vincent van Gogh in a digital context. And so I did that, which was a bit of fun. Yeah, so a young guy who had been in the studio and saw my work approached me, and who was very big into the NFT crypto world, said, "Look, I think I absolutely love your work, and it's incredibly well suited. There's surely a massive opportunity for you in the NFT space." And I was looking for a partner in a way to help me navigate this domain, and so I was all too happy to sort of work with him and create some kind of collection just to see what would happen in that space. It was fascinating, and
your work does, like you said, does seem really suited to that that format.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's digital and I guess, but also not in a. I mean, that's one of my hesitancies with that whole world is there's so much absolute crap in terms of NFT assets because and this is the problem with it actually, it's anyone can create a digital asset. You can take a photo on your iPhone and call it a piece of art. And celebrities were producing sometimes pretty questionable pieces of art, but selling them for loads because they were celebrities. And so there's a lot of noise and nonsense. But this guy Boston said, well, I think you've got a particularly unique style and surely it's going to cut above a lot of the other stuff. And so we embarked on a really cool project. But midway through that, there was an almighty crash in the crypto space, as you may recall, and the whole landscape completely and utterly changed. And I think a lot of people actually lost a lot of money from just the hyperinflationary nonsense of the whole thing, investing in some digital assets which really didn't actually hold much absolute value. And but the whole thing changed, and I then had other priorities and focuses, and so we kind of parked it. In terms of that particular project, it is changing again a little bit, and I might get more into it. But to be honest, I'm just busy enough with so many other things.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And we just touched briefly on your social media, but I do find what you've done on Instagram, I mean, it was such an easy practice to research and learn about because you are very generous on Instagram with your films of your process in particular, but also just kind of talking about what you're thinking about in your practice and that kind of thing. So it's a fantastic Instagram to follow for sure. And that's all part of your, I guess, comes back to your design and sort of advertising connections and branding interest.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm not a natural digital marketer really in the sense I don't have any kind of strategy. I just can't be bothered trying to work out a strategy, and I'm not particularly analytical as well. But what I really do find I get is a lot of enjoyment from just thinking creatively about how to demonstrate my work. So creating these little videos is just fun. It's just a fun extension of my design skills, I guess. And I've sort of taught myself Premiere Pro, and not to a sophisticated level, but enough to just add a little bit of magic to some of these videos. And I just enjoy that as a pure creative pursuit in its own right. It's just a fun deviation sometimes away from other activities.
That's right, and it's still creative, and it's very slick. I mean, a lot of your videos that you have on Instagram end with Tim Christie, and on black, and it feels very well designed. And I just wonder how you actually fit in all these amazing things into your life.
I don't know. Kind of mental. It is mental. I actually have to credit a lot of the fact that I'm saying to my wife, Katie. She's a super organizer, remarkable. And without her, I just don't know how I would do all this. Because, there's a lot. There's a lot. And this is one of the challenges. Now I'm a full-time professional artist. It's just like I'm kind of living the dream, but it's also kind of insane some of the times. And
I can imagine.
Every year for the last 3 years, I go to Katie. I think I should just employ someone. I should just get someone to do some of this other stuff. And I haven't, and I don't. But
you could.
I could. I mean, I kind of could, but I'm just sort of I'm always a bit nervous about just another overhead. Even though I'm doing pretty well, we are in a recession, and there's always something where I'm like, maybe I just not quite ready for that.
The nature of your practice feels like you need to do that, and it would be totally,
I could go there.
Acceptable.
I could go there. Yeah, it's a constant balance of creativity and commerce, I guess. And I'm kind of actively running a business, and I've just got to make sure the balance is right, and I don't over commercialize, that I don't end up becoming inundated with sort of projects that are more business orientated, and that I don't lose the creativity. So that's certainly a big challenge. But that said, there's loads of artists around. I mean, Jeff Koons is a classic example, where he's literally got, and he's questioned about this all the time. Like, you've got all these painters, this team of painters doing your paintings for you. And of course, he comes back to, well, it's the idea. And I guess going right back to what I was talking about at design school and things, it is the idea is the critical component in all of this.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of technical processes which I'm doing, which are sometimes quite repetitive. And so it's not out of the question that one day, I mean, I don't know, we'll see how it goes. I'm kind of, just sort of following my instincts at the moment. And I'm cautious of, I don't know. I know I could, if I really wanted in a pure business sense, massively leverage my brand here and especially overseas. And I'm just not sure if I want to do that or whether
It's
I don't know.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, you're in an interesting position in a way. I mean, it's like every artist's dream to have all these opportunities and connections around the world, and you are in a good position in that way. But it's just working out how you manage that, and the perfectionist in you that you mentioned earlier would be hard probably to get somebody else to do your work.
Yes, that's probably true. That's true around the house as well for certain things. Katie gives me grief about that all the time. So I don't know. And it is a lot of work. Every time you do something overseas, it's actually, I mean, I've got a couple of things happening in LA and then something in Hong Kong, and it's kind of cool that I'm selling high value pieces of art to a completely different market, but there's work in liaising with those galleries and logistics and sending stuff there. And I kind of do it because why not? You only live once. There's kind of a joy with doing that sort of thing. But it's also there's work that goes with it. When I went to LA the year before last, it took me an entire day just to pack the art.
Yeah, I was going to say that the packaging alone would be a lot of work.
I was trying to get it into like Russian dolls, stacking pieces inside pieces, and I even created 2 pieces specifically that I could deconfigure. Is that a word? Deconfigure or take apart and reassemble, just so I could get it all on the plane. And that whole exercise almost made me think I don't think I could ever do that again. Like also just carting these big packages around, hiring SUVs from the airport. And I mean, I was particularly worried about going through customs in LA because that can catch up with you a little bit. And they did question me a lot at passport, but I think that's because I told them I was an artist. I'm going to red flag. And then I sort of, and then I was like, okay, I got through that. Now customs, what am I going to say at customs? Because, 2 massive cases of high value art. And I had this whole script. No, I might not, it's a trade show. I'm not necessarily going to sell it. Kept walking. And then that's when I find myself outside and I was like, oh, there's no customs. There was literally no customs at LAX when I traveled through it. Anyway, but those all sorts of things, you're not, it's taking you away from doing art. So it's got to be,
I mean, all that, there's so much else that you're doing that, it is hard to imagine when you actually do your making. Yeah. So you and your lovely wife, amazing wife by the sounds of it, Katie, you have started your gallery, which is in Wellington, which is a really new concept, isn't it, with yoga and an art gallery?
Yoga and art, absolutely, yeah. I don't know if it's really, no, it definitely has been done overseas in terms of like museum spaces and galleries suddenly putting on a yoga class or something like that. But I don't think it's been done in a dedicated sense where you've got a yoga practitioner or yoga business and an art business combined in one space. To be honest, it was all a bit of it wasn't a very serious conversation. It was all a bit of a pipe dream. Katie and I occasionally joked, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did yoga and art in one space? And then we'd never really thought about it, doing it seriously. We weren't even looking at spaces. And then I just wandered past this building one day and peered in, and it used to be a fabric shop, just absolutely stuffed with fabric. Couldn't see the wood for the trees, but it had been gutted. I looked in and I thought, wow, that's a beautiful space and the perfect size for if we were ever going to consider doing something like this. And I actually needed an art studio because I was starting to take over the house, like ridiculously. And that was not fun for the family. And so I needed some kind of space, and I mean, this was way bigger than you need for an art studio. But I thought, well, actually, if we combine the yoga and the art and maybe a gallery, then I can't think of a better space in town. So we talked to the property broker and were able to negotiate a really good price. The landlord, I think, was interested in just having an interesting tenant, to be honest. And that is it's a landlord who owns a lot of property. And this was just something he had bought. And we knew it needed strengthening. We knew the landlord would probably sell it or demolish it or develop it. We knew it was only short term. We just negotiated a very good price for a short term rent, just to do it. Life's short. Why not? Why not? Let's just do it. What's the worst that can happen? It's a
Add it
big,
to your list of things that you do.
yeah. I mean, it could have been a big failure, and you just go, well, okay, well, at least we tried it. We'll never wonder whether that was a good idea or not. We've done it.
Yeah.
And it was tough, to be honest. The early Omicron, when that hit New Zealand, was a nightmare for everywhere, and including the CBD in Wellington. There were protests, and this was when we were just launching, and so it was tough for Katie to grow that yoga business initially. But fine art was doing incredibly well during COVID. I mean, the timing for me was incredible. I had all this art in galleries. The Poider Room, which we haven't really talked about much, but they have sold a huge number of my prints through that time. So I had a very viable business. There was a bit of resilience there for us. Katie was able to slowly grow her yoga. It was just a perfect combination of elements. I need walls to exhibit the art. Katie needs a lot of floor space for her yoga and Pilates. And so it makes sense. There's some resilience in the business as a whole because of the different things we're doing. Plus, people get to do yoga surrounded by art, and at night when we keep the lights off and all my light works are radiating into the space and shifting through different hues. It's complete. It really maximizes the escapist, immersive experience of doing yoga.
Totally.
So it just kind of works. I've got a studio there. I've got space to exhibit my art. So, I mean, it's not like a wildly profitable venture in its own right, but because it's not a massive high foot traffic area, it's not like I get hundreds of visitors every day, but it's just awesome if I need to meet someone. Obviously, it gives me a very professional edge. People must look at me and go, "Oh, you're obviously doing reasonably okay." So, it's no problems there. And then, as I may have mentioned, the landlord bought quite a lot of art off me. He's got all sorts of other developments. That was enough in the first year to almost cover the entire rent. So that was, so it was a really smart choice in the end for us. And then towards the end of last year, the property manager said, well, we're selling the building because partly due to the recession and things, and they just didn't need it. So just letting you know. But, maybe you could talk to them about some kind of deal or something. So there was a lot of conversations and negotiations, but in the end, we actually decided we would commit to buying the building, and there was a creative exchange of various things, including a massive big branding exercise, which I'm currently in the middle of on top of everything else. So I'm rebranding his wine company in Martinborough, which is actually really cool to return to some design. And now we own the building, but we have taken on the responsibility to strengthen it. But because it's a single-story dwelling, and it's mostly pretty exposed anyway, and quite industrial, we can do that for a reasonably good percentage of the value of the building. So, and to the minimum NBS rating, just so we can get the council away who have this deadline coming up later this year. So that's Yo Gallery, and
Brilliant.
we feel very privileged to have somehow found ourselves in that situation, to be able to own our own space in the middle of town.
That's amazing. And thanks to all your hard work and your amazing ideas, it's brilliant. That sounds such a cool concept, and the fact that you're kind of working together in some way, or in the same space, out of the same space. And I love that idea of the yoga with the lighting. That would just be so beautiful.
I think it is. I think I've done a few classes, and I've enjoyed that dimension of it. Yeah, just look, it's like everything. You live once. Um, you just sometimes just got to do things. But, it was mainly emotionally driven. Like, just, you could carry on doing the same thing over and over again, or you could try different things and
Mm,
just experience something completely different. And it comes
yeah.
with challenges and sometimes headaches and things. But when the roof started leaking and things like that. But ultimately, yeah, a totally worthwhile exercise.
And we're not going to do the questions this time, which is very unusual. But we've decided that we have been talking for quite some time and we have kind of covered a lot of those questions anyway through our conversation. So can you just tell me one little question for you, Tim? Where to from here?
So in the immediate future, am embarking right now on a big collaboration. So that's with a digital animation company who approached me out of the blue. Quite bizarrely, actually, at Christmas time, I was saying to Katie, the next thing I really, really want to do is some kind of projected, animated version of my art in an immersive sense with music and maybe even putting some yoga and dance into it, something like that. It'd just be really cool. That's just the next cool thing I want to try. Came back to Wellington and literally got this email saying, "Hi, Tim, we love your art. We're a digital animation company. We've got this vision to create Wellington's first dedicated immersive digital experience, and we just want to do a collaborative piece with you." Um, so we're going to pilot something essentially in a space in a few months' time. So that's my next big thing. But I've made a leather bag just for fun, which I want to find an opportunity for. And I've got a few other things on the go, as well as this big branding job for Lunaris.
Mm,
So I'm going to be very busy, and in fact, I'm not doing the art show this year, and I've opted out of a few things. I've got to
yeah.
focus my attention where it needs to be. So yeah.
Mm. And are you ever taking commissions now, or do you feel just too busy for that?
Oh no, no, definitely take commissions. Yeah, yeah. No, I love doing commission work. A lot of people have actually asked me to do their kids or their dogs or things,
Mm,
as my
yeah.
work works particularly well with faces and things. Yeah, there's one possible one coming up. I just need to, I haven't heard back from, but this was a guy that me to paint his four children in a large format painting. So that will probably happen at some point.
Mm, yeah. It's
Uh,
incredible, isn't it, when you use people that you can actually recognize a face in that format? It's actually quite
yeah,
surprising.
well, behind the two-dimensional design in a way, a lot of the time, a photographic image
Mm,
or a retouched, illustration that's got a three-dimensional component to it, I guess.
yeah.
So yeah, it's not in a way, it's not surprising to me, but I think yeah, definitely is surprising to people
Mm, yeah. It is.
that's experienced it. They're like, oh wow, that like I did one for my cousin because he helped me out with some legal stuff, and everyone's, oh, geez, that really looks like Paul. That's amazing. That looks like Paul. How have you done that? But of course, it was based on photographic reference imagery. So yeah,
Yeah. But people who don't really understand your process, it just seems like, once again, magic.
mm.
You're a magician, which I think you actually are.
Maybe on some level.
Yeah. So we better bring it to a close because you've got like 3 minutes and you need to
I've
be
I've got
somewhere.
to, I've got to head down and talk to a whole bunch of people in my studio about
Yeah.
I've got to do this whole thing all over again.
Oh my God, you'll be exhausted. You'll have to have
With
a glass of wine at the end of that, I think.
Yeah, I know. With this one, it'll be visually. I've got a visual prompts. I'm going to show them some videos and things, so it'll be
Yeah.
easy.
Oh, well, you've done well. And I think, it is a long episode, but it is so, everything that you've done has so much informed your practice and what you're doing now. And it's just such a sort of interesting story, an interesting journey, which is incredibly inspirational and quite exhausting to listen to be honest. And I'm just
Oh,
like, oh my God, I just don't think I could handle all of that that's going on in your head and the stuff that you're doing. I think you're amazing. I've got so much respect for what you're doing and what you're achieving, and I can't wait to see where you take it.
Thank you. Yeah, very kind words. I appreciate it. And I've really enjoyed sharing my story. So yeah, awesome opportunity.